Hello, everyone. I think I've almost gotten through all my recent video requests, but I had one more on EMF toxicity. So I wanted to get to that. And then I'm actually going to be taking the next week and a half off of work. I may be able to squeeze out a video sometime next week, but I'm not sure, so I don't want to promise anything. So you may get a little break from my YouTube content. So in the meantime, feel free to submit any other questions that you may have that you want me to answer as soon as I get back to it. So I want to put a caveat that I am by no means an expert on the issue of EMF. Honestly, my understanding of the issue is fairly surface, and so I don't want to act like I'm going to give a bunch of super profound, insightful information. But I just wanted to give a little bit of my basic understanding and what my recommendations would be, just from my little bit of reading on the subject and clinical experiences I've had with people regarding this issue. So, first of all, I think there is a misunderstanding in terms of what actually the damage that EMFs do are, right? Because there are some skeptics on EMF toxicity who say, well, these wavelengths don't even actually penetrate our cells, right? So how could they possibly cause any damage to our health, right? And so you see a lot of people who are in more of the kind of conventional science world saying that, like, on the level of physics, like, this doesn't make sense, and my understanding is that the real concern is not so much about cells in and of themselves being damaged by these kinds of electromagnetic wavelengths, but it's really the communication between cells that is being disrupted by these fields. So yes, it's unlikely that, from my understanding, again, I have a surface understanding of this, but my understanding it's unlikely that tissues themselves are being damaged in a classical sense, but we are electrical beings, right? Like, our cells communicate to each other through electrical impulses. We are having electrical signals fire all the time, between neurons and between cells to communicate with each other. And those communication pathways can be disrupted by EMFs. And so that is really the concern there. And I would say, just like any other type of toxicity, it is really an issue of accumulation, right? So this is why you see such a huge spectrum of people, some of whom don't seem to be affected by EMFs at all, and other people who cannot be in the same room with a cell phone because their symptoms flare so badly when they are exposed to this type of toxicity. So it's not that some people are crazy and perceiving things happening in their body that aren't happening. There's things happening, right? But it just really depends on the total capacity and resilience of your body to manage a disruptive force like EMFs, right? And some people aren't going to notice the difference at all, and other people really, really are. So, I would say, if you are a generally sensitive person, especially if you have issues with things like detoxification, if you have any kind of nervous system based disorder, whether it's dysautonomia or chronic pain or psychiatric illness, things like that, this may be something to look into. I don't think it's the end all be all, but there are certainly anecdotal reports of people who had very stubborn symptoms and they kind of did all the things, and then when they really started addressing EMF exposure, suddenly they noticed a big difference in their symptoms. So it's not something that I think everyone has to worry acutely about, but it's certainly something to consider and experiment with, especially if you feel like you're hitting a dead end in your health progress. I am not a fan of exposing ourselves to toxicity that is unnecessary, right? Ideally, I think, I would like to get people and have people get themselves to a state of health where they don't have to constantly worry about every little thing in their environment, right? I think humans are incredibly resilient, and we can be exposed to a certain number of disruptive forces, ideally, and be okay if we are in overall good health. But also, that doesn't mean you should go out and expose yourself to toxicity that you don't have to. So there are just kind of some general things to help overall reduce your exposure to EMFs. One of those things is to make sure that you are grounding daily, right? And part of the reason that grounding works in the mental health world is because you are actually grounding from an electrical perspective, right? Like we can measure these things, and we see a difference when people are putting their bare feet on natural substances. It does really change what's happening, in an electrical sense, in your body. So, putting your bare feet on grass, on wood, on stone, on sand, whatever you have access to, trying to do that every day if possible. This is something that is just going to be like general, like hygiene. In my perspective, whether you feel like you're sensitive to these things or not, it's probably just a good, like, hygiene detoxification practice to bring into your routine. The other thing would be to be mindful about things like ear pods, right? Anything that's like Bluetooth connectivity, as much as you can hook things up to like old school wires, so that you don't have, as many wavelengths running through the air. That's going to be positive too. I mean, some people like to even like hardwire their internet in as opposed to using Wi-Fi. Again, as much as you can use like hardwired electronics, um, as opposed to other things like Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. That's a generally good practice. I also am a big fan of turning things on airplane mode at night. And this partly is for me just to help me set boundaries around work and technology use. Right, I will put my phone on airplane mode when I'm ready to kind of like settle down, for the night and wind down for sleep. And then I won't turn my phone off airplane mode, and I won't, use my computer, I won't turn my computer on until I've done my whole morning routine and I am ready to like, engage with the outside world and work and all that stuff. So I'm usually up for several hours before I turn any of that stuff on. Um, so the second reason that this is beneficial is that you are exposed to less EMFs, by not having your Wi-Fi or Bluetooth things going, overnight while you're sleeping, or first thing in the morning, or when you're getting ready for bed. And so it's just a nice little detox at the end of the day, overnight. So doing things like that is great. And then some people do find, again, people who are more sensitive, they kind of have to go on, longer term EMF detoxes, right? So they may like go out to a cabin in the woods for a weekend once a month, right? Or a week every couple months. And so, going someplace, if you have access to it, that is like totally out of cell service, where there's no internet, and you can spend a lot of time grounding, like going barefoot in nature, that's a bigger detox practice that some people really benefit from. And again, it seems to be correlated with overall toxicity, right? So there are some hypotheses around people who have more significant levels of toxicity in their body, whether that's from gut dysbiosis, whether that's from heavy metals, whether that's from industrial solvents or other synthetic chemicals. People who have high levels of toxicity tend to be more sensitive to these things as a general trend, right? And we don't quite know why this is or how this works, but it does seem to be like the more congested your detox pathways are, the more you're going to have a hard time with this. And so if you know that's you, you might want to take this more seriously. If you don't seem to have as many problems with this, or you're noticing that your health is improving without worrying about this, then don't, so something to pay attention to, in context of your entire, health story. It's not a bad thing to do some general hygiene around, regardless. It's probably not good for anyone, but how seriously you have to take it is going to depend on your specific situation. So, again, not an expert on the topic. My understanding is fairly surface, but that's just kind of some basic tips I have around it. I do know that Dr. Mercola has a book called EMF'd that goes much more deeply into the topic. I have not read it myself yet, but I have heard it is quite good. So that could be, and I generally respect his work, and so that could be something to look into more if you want more on the topic. Okay, so that's, I think, again, my last requested video. I'm going to be taking a break off YouTube for the next week and a half, very likely. But if in the meantime you want me to do videos on other topics, please go ahead and comment or email me and ask, and I will get to it when I get back. In the meantime, I am running a sale on all my online courses, and you can use the code Countdown25. Referring to the countdown to my book tentatively coming out in the fall, to get some self-guided coaching for a discounted price. And also, I'm going to be doing a group class called Brain Food to help give you some of the cooking skills and basic knowledge to start resetting that gut-brain axis through nutrition. And that's going to be on July 12th, and signups are open, so go ahead and get your spot reserved for that. And that's what I have going on lately. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for the questions you're submitting, and I'd be happy to answer more.